It's unusual to have a state university that is in the business of authorizing charter schools. We are proud of the work of the CSI, and we think that it is extremely important that we do it extremely well, that we set a standard for other authorizers around the country. And so far we think we're doing a pretty good job at that. And so I think the idea of the CSI holding this conference about replication is, I think, very consistent with its work so far, because we've been focused on how to at least ensure, if not replicating, that there's a consistency with respect to standards and outcomes for students at the schools that are affiliated with SUNY. And I think that that is a goal that probably all of you share. Right? So how do we get some consistency with respect to both the learning standards but also academic outcomes for students? And anybody who's been involved in this work for a little while knows that's not easy. It's not easy because schools are complex organizations. As an aside, I will just share a short story. I was working in Boston while teaching at Harvard, and was asked by Tom Pizan, who was at the time the superintendent, to help them address a problem. The problem was this: they were carrying out reforms in all of their high schools, and it was clear that some high schools were getting better and others were not. And they weren't sure why. What was wrong? Why were some schools clearly improving and others not? And they asked us to help. And I said, well, why don't we try something? Why don't we try to study the reforms through the experience of the students? Try to understand whether or not the students were experienced what the adults thought they had done. And these were schools that at that time were in the midst of converting to small learning communities. Many of them were under considerable pressure because the new high-stakes exams in Massachusetts had just been implemented, so they had to make sure their students passed those exams, otherwise they'd be denied diplomas. Many of the schools had adopted various kinds of curriculum, and we wanted to know what it all meant to the students on a day-to-day basis. And what we found is something that's a pretty consistent finding throughout education research, which is that every school has its own culture. And the culture is made up not just of who's in charge, but of that staff. It's affected clearly by the students themselves, by their parents, by the surrounding community. Even the physical makeup and setup of a school affects what happens within a school. And not surprisingly, some schools had found ways to create cultures that allow them to be much more successful than others at meeting the needs of their students. And we try to help them to understand why that was the case. Now, one of the things we also learned during the course of that research, it's harder to help schools that need more help. In some ways, it's because where do you begin? Right? So as you think today about this question of replication, and what does it take to take models that have worked one place and apply them someplace else, I'm going to encourage you to think not simply about the systems that need to be in place and the infrastructure to support the development of people and programs and curriculum, but also how do you create cultures that are going to be positive learning environments for students, environments where students will be motivated to learn, environments where teachers will be excited about their work and will be inspired to teach. We know this about high-performance schools. High-performance schools are places where people work hard. Never been to a high-performance school where people don't work hard. I've never seen a leader make people work hard either. I've never seen a contract make people work hard either. That is, there's something about the environment, something about the culture that can, in fact, result in a school being greater than the sum of its parts, people organizing themselves around a common vision and therefore investing more of their time and energy in realizing that vision, and as a result being willing to apply themselves much more than they would otherwise. And I think that's ultimately the question: how do we create cultures in schools that do that, that bring people together around a common set of ideas and visions? So I'm hoping that you'll get to explore those. I've had a chance to look closely at one organization I think that's that's approached the issue of replication as well as anyone else, and that's KIPP. KIPP holds their leadership institute at NYU in the summers. And for the last 5 years, I've spoken at that institute and helped them in early stages of design the institute. And one of the things that's clear to me is that they take nothing for granted. Every year they go back and they rethink and re-examine what they've done in light of what they learned in the schools. And they tinker and they revamp and they revise, because what they're after is trying to find ways to ensure a consistency in quality that would be present wherever KIPP school is located. Now, they're not there yet, and they will admit it. But they are working hard, and I think they've probably come closer than any group I've seen. And I apologize in advance if some of you think you already got it figured out at doing this. So there are models out there. I think the Success Academies here in New York City. I'm not sure if anybody's here with the Success Academies. Not today. They're working on replication.
Yeah, they're all doing teacher training this summer, those networks. I don't know what they're up to.
Yeah. So anyway, there are some organizations, some networks out there that I think have begun to really do this work quite well and very thoughtfully, that we should learn from. And I encourage those of you who are new to this to try to ask questions. Okay, who can I learn from? How have they developed these systems that seem to work and apply to other places? I do want to say one other thing about charter schools, because I think, as all of us know, it's a source of great controversy in many communities throughout the country right now. And I support charter schools for the reason that I think charter schools were created, and that is to be a source of innovation in public education. That is, I think it should be easier in charter schools because of the flexibility in hiring, because of the flexibility, relative at least, with respect to law, to do some things that traditional public schools can't do. And I'm starting to see it, but I think there's a lot of room for growth. I still see very few charter high schools, for example. And I think there's good reason for that. Charter high schools are harder. And not a lot of groups out there willing to step up to that, although there are a few. I would say that we've only just begun to see schools step up and say, we will serve the hardest to serve students. We just authorized this year schools that will serve recently incarcerated students, students who are coming from foster care, students who are homeless children. We need schools, charter schools, that have the flexibility, will want to step up and say, we will take that on and demonstrate that with that flexibility, with the expertise we bring, we can find ways and strategies to educate children that are presently not being served well. And then innovation should also mean innovation with respect to curriculum and to teaching and learning. That is, that we are really finding ways to deepen student engagement, to not only bring in rigor, but bring in intellectual curiosity, get kids excited about learning. I'm very encouraged by the STEM school that Old West Prairie is planning and working on because of its relationship to the college. I think that for too long, higher education has not been directly involved in K-12, and we suffer as a result. It doesn't make any sense that we're a nation with such great universities and such mediocre K-12 schools. And I think if we can find ways to bridge those gaps, it would help. So I'm looking forward to the conversation today for the time I can be here. I'm encouraging you to listen well and ask tough questions of each other because I don't think there are easy answers to these issues that have been raised about replication. Anyone who's done this work or seen it up close knows that just because it's worked one place else doesn't mean it worked in another place. The biggest challenge we face in education is how to ensure consistency, how to get people to collaborate, how to get people to learn from each other. I think all of us are aware that you can go to a school and find one really excellent teacher, often right next door to someone who is not so excellent. And what we're not good at doing in education is enabling those who are in need to learn from those who already have it figured out. So if we can figure that out today, or at least get further along than we have, we will have done a great thing. So I encourage you all to be open to trying to find some answers to those important questions. Thank you.